to the Sunshine Coast Regional District Policing and Public Safety Committee for July 16th, Thursday. It's 1:32. I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the territories of the Sechelt and the Squamish peoples, and we are conducting our business here today. So thank you very much. Do people have agendas in front of them? So before we adopt the agenda, there is the standard items that are on there, and then there's the verbals. We were to have a agenda review at one point, but I think we're going to do a little bit of it on the fly here. So the idea of 4, 5, or 7 was within the time constraint to kind of do a little bit of a generative roundtable. I think is there's been some quite a bit of interest in the reallocation of police funding. So we're going to try to do this in an hour, right? So that we have some time to square things away before transportation and resuming infrastructure services. So before we adopt the agenda, is that something that people can work with? We'll go through the regular items and then go for this generative discussion around number 5 in particular. And if we have a little bit of time, we can move into something else. If that's, what are we, you've got some nods. Any comments from people? Okay. All right. So as it is then, a motion to adopt the agenda more or less as presented. Okay. And first and second, and all those in favor. All right. Thank you very much. So I think just as Director Paul, I think this is your first visit to the policing. So do you want to just introduce yourself to us, so everyone knows?
Hello all. Name is Warren Paul. I am the current chief of the Sechelt Nation, and I'm really happy to be here. Really happy to be joining in on this little festive occasion. Really happy to be off Skype. Because that was unimpressive, to say the least. But all that being said, happy to be here. Thank you.
Good. Thanks very much. So number 2 on the we don't have presentations or delegations. The minutes. So we just need to receive these minutes. So okay, we have a motion and a seconder to receive the minutes from past. It's just a formal process.
Yeah, and just a minor correction on recommendation number 5.
Number 5. Okay.
The word should be subsidy.
Oh, subsidy, and yeah. So Tara, you will be able to adjust that for us. Thank you. Okay, so we are receiving them with the adjustments there. So we're all okay with that? So everyone in favor of the minutes with adjustments? And I guess I just want to update some of the people who haven't been here before that the SCRD has submitted resolutions to UBCM around police-based victim services and cannabis safety, which came out of this committee back starting October and then in January. So there are a couple items that came out of this committee and are moving forward as recommendations for resolutions to the UBCM convention in September, which will be held virtually. Does anyone need any information? I'm thinking maybe Sue, you're not quite on the SCRD information loop. Is there anything about the past resolutions around cannabis or anything in particular? It was about the fire and safety around medicinal cannabis and to have local government authority to go in and inspect these. That was the idea behind it. Okay. All right, so getting back to it. So we've got some reports. And I think we could just, we could receive reports 3 and 4 for receipt. And first and second, all those in favor, receipt. Thank you. And now if we can turn, got the right mouse here. Um, Sergeant Newman, is there anything that you would like to draw our attention to in the recent statistics that are before us?
Yeah, I could comment on a few things. First, I want to pass on Poppy's regrets. Her absence was unavoidable, so I'm stepping in her stead here. So
Thank you very much.
just start with that. Yeah, I mean, it's been 6 months since your last meeting. I think everyone knows why. What I would, before I comment on quickly on the stats, I mean, who knows how these are going to play out in, when we compare them to next year or as years past, because it's been an abnormal time, as everyone knows. So I think we have to be careful when we do extrapolate from these stats. But that being said, I think there are a few things that probably stand out to people, and I'll comment on them quickly if that's okay. We'll just start off with quarter one. You'll notice street checks are down significantly. Just wanted to let people know that's not a reflection of the work being done. That's a change in national policy. We are no longer able to record interactions with people the same way. That came through from a public complaints review of all police agency interaction across the country. It actually stemmed from something in Ontario, but as a result, we can't report the same. So that's why you're going to see a decline in street checks. So it's not a reflection of the work being done. It's just a reporting thing. Quarter one, definitely you'll see a spike in the SCRD from thefts from vehicle. Not really much to comment on. That's sometimes cyclical. No suspects was identified. Break and enters, Seashelt and the SCRD, that was quarter one and quarter two. You're going to see we've been rocked pretty hard actually for the last 6 months, and probably actually, to be truthful, the last 9 months. We haven't seen, it's not residential. It tends to be more specific to businesses and what we deem to be other and seasonal. Seasonal is, we kind of see that in the March, April, May months, people coming over their cabins or whatever were left vacant for another number of months. So that is somewhat typical, but we have had a higher than normal property crime rate, especially with regards to break and enters in the SCRD area and Seashelt. The last one for quarter one was you'll see violation tickets. That relates when we pull vehicle overs, issue tickets, warnings, etc. You're going to see a decline there. Some of it's associated to COVID in March, where things obviously changed in the last half of March, but it's not going to count for all the change. I think the biggest reason for that is we diverted a lot of our resources and focused them on the property crime issue, which took away from some of the proactive vehicle related issues. So that would probably associate for that. But that being said, we do place Poppy and the detachment place a high priority and a high focus on proactive driving enforcement action. So we've definitely laid out our expectations for the coming quarters and year to the detachment. We expect to see those numbers rise. Maybe, do you want to wait for questions after? Or do you want me to just quickly touch on quarter two?
I'm okay with continuing on. I don't see any hands up, so and we'll go for questions after. Thank you.
Sounds good. Quarter two, same thing. Street checks, I don't think I have to repeat that. That's a policy change. You will see a foot patrol, a significant decrease. That I can directly relate to COVID, both from our, I guess, day-to-day function change, less people out. So, I mean, I think we can attribute that directly to COVID pandemic response. Break and enters, like I said, were up in both quarters, albeit June, they started to decline. And once again, they weren't residential based, they were business and construction and seasonal. Should note that we did charge on 6 of those files, so there were suspects identified. So they didn't all go unsolved. 6 is actually a fairly high rate. And that's just charges, people charged. That doesn't account for the number of B&Es that were charged. That would be more than the 6. You'll see our violation tickets rose more to a level consistent with 2019. And that was because we started to get, I guess, more comfortable with COVID in our response, and we went somewhat back to normal policing. And you'll see, and if you go to the month to month, you'll see in May and June, there was a spike in theft from auto files for the SCRD. and that was directly related to catalytic converter thefts. And that's a regional trend. That's actually a North American trend. So we weren't immune to that. We are actively investigating that. And you'll see in July, actually, we've had none. And that's probably directly related to some overt pressure we put on a number of people we believe are responsible. So I think that sums up the reports. I'm definitely open to any questions anyone have.
Questions from members? Director McMahon.
Sorry, I should have used my button. I know there was a meeting with police and bylaw and local people about beach parties down at Roberts Creek Pier, but I'm hearing a lot of concern from residents about congestion and parties and fires and so forth down at the beaches, particularly in my area, Ocean Beach Esplanade. So I just wanted to inquire whether the police have any plans over the summer to patrol the beaches?
Yeah, just to let you know, we do receive funding each summer. Typically it's from May to the September long weekend, which is granted by the province, and we direct that to what we call our seasonal or crime reduction budget. That started a little late this year for a number of obvious reasons. But our focus then is, high problem areas within the provincial boundaries of the Sunshine Coast. Even though we do stuff within the district of Sechelt, the primary focus is for it to be in the provincial funded areas. Roberts Creek, Ocean Beach Esplanade are one of the areas that we're directing members on these shifts, which are typically Thursday, Friday, Saturdays, to direct their attention to. We're also been directing the general duty membership to try and increase visibility at Roberts Creek and, like I said, Ocean Beach Esplanade and other areas. But we're definitely now, as we're moving into hopefully better weather, and I think everyone sees there's more people on the coast, we are increasing our visibility and hopefully some enforcement action.
If I may ask, Sergeant, the funding that comes in, what kind of capacity increase does that give you to do this seasonal work?
It's a significant capacity. It gives us, it's your numbers most of it's on overtime, so it depends on who works. Obviously junior members, we don't pay them as much as senior members, but it essentially just on average gives us in the neighborhood of 80 extra shifts a summer. And that's the 2 people shifts, and that anywhere from 6 to 8 hours. It also incorporates, we use a lot of that money towards our marine patrols, and that would be patrolling, Thorman B. Keats, Gambier, and up further to Pender and up the inlet, and that's Jervis and Sechelt Inlet. So it's a quite a large capacity to increase our presence.
Thank you. Director McMahon, your hand is up again.
Yeah, I couldn't resist asking about catalytic converters. This is not an area of expertise of mine. Are there particular vehicles that are being targeted for that kind of theft?
The truthful, if it has it, they'll target it. It's a widespread across North America. So, I mean, some vehicles where they're placed, have a difference, because they're easier to get to. It's not like you can it takes you 30 seconds. So it's usually about where they are in the vehicle has an impact. But I can't tell you right now what they are, but there are published online, which ones are the most, much like we used to do with auto theft. You would say what the most likely targeted vehicles are, but unfortunately, if it has it, it's going to be a target.
Thank you. And we have Director Kroll. Did you have something there, or?
Just to Director McMahon's, when we were doing the business watch, we were, it was indicated to us that it was sort of European imports that had the highest rate of catalytic converter theft. I guess they're possibly a little more expensive unit.
Any other questions for Sergeant Newman about RCMP stats or anything in particular? Okay. All right, so that's items 3 and 4 done. Number 5. So what I'm going to propose is just we'll do a roundtable. So we each get, like, say a minute or a couple minutes, 2 minutes, to say what our understanding of how we understand what this topic is, just from a overall point of view. And you know, there is limitations with the SCRD. Would that be a reasonable thing to go with? So a couple minutes, say what you know about reallocation, defunding, what this topic means to you. Anyone want to go first? Donna.
Yeah, I believe I brought that up at a SCRD meeting in response to questions I got from residents. And part of the difficulty is that I don't think a lot of residents understand how policing is funded on the Sunshine Coast. So, because we don't, as the SCRD, we do not make policing decisions. So I just thought it would be helpful if we could get a little orientation to how that works, and you know, where the decisions about policing and levels of policing are made. I don't know if anybody's prepared to do that, because I'm throwing this out there without warning.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll weigh in a little bit, and Dawn can correct all my errors that I put out. In the District of Sechelt, we pay for RCMP a percentage. I believe we're at, what is it? Are we at 50% right now, or 75%? Something like that. Whatever.
It should be 70%.
770. Okay, it's based on percent or on population, right? So while Gibson's is looking at hitting 5,000 and then having to actually contribute from their budget, we've actually started looking at the conversation. What happens when we hit 15,000 or whatever the next number is? Because then we have to pay 90%. So that's a conversation that we need to be prepared for. So inside of that, we meet every year with Poppy, and we go over what their strategic plan is for the year and identify priorities that we want the RCMP to focus on in our area and on the Sunshine Coast. It might be, we might say something like, we want more foot patrols, or we want more visibility, or we want more focus on you know, speeding, whatever, right? We would identify that inside of their strategic plan, and then that actually forms part of what the stats are that are gathered, so they can look at how do they meet those priorities that we've identified. With regards to numbers of staff, the province provides a certain number. The District of Sechelt pays for a certain number. And part of what Poppy needs to do, and Dawn is, you know, working with Poppy probably has to do some of this too, is keep track of the deployment of the various provincial staff and the District of Sechelt paid staff. And then how many we have is a conversation. We could, as a municipality, say we want more RCMP officers and we're willing to pay for them. And that would work into the agreement that we have with them. And that's a conversation that we, part of what Poppy's been doing over the last year is looking at actually filling the slots that have been vacant. So there's been a shortfall, I think, across the country. Dawn can speak to that maybe. There's been a shortfall of actual members across the country. And so when we've been trying to fill the positions that we actually had in place, it took some time to get that, because part of how do we ask for additional members, or the province look at additional members when we haven't actually filled the ones we have, to see how they can provide the service that's required. So that's, I think we're at full complement now. And so that'll be a conversation I'm sure that's going to show up over the next year or two.
Yeah, it's Sergeant Newman again. Yeah, just to clarify, yeah, no, Darnell, I agreed with almost everything. Like for instance, on the coast, it's not exact, but it's about 1/3 or 35% of our resourcing is district to Seashell fund, and the rest is the province. The numbers for the province is a much more difficult process. The district to Seashell obviously has the ability to fund an extra member or however many if they choose in a much more effective way. The province, it's much more convoluted. Let me put it that way. But like Darnell says, we engage, Warren at with the Seashell Nation, and we sign letters of expectation, and much like we did with the district of Seashell, the town of Gibsons, and with the SCRD on what your policing priorities are, and that's kind of incorporated in our what we call an annual performance plan, and that's what we tailor our like priorities for the year round. So the SCR does have an impact in what we do from a day-to-day policing basis. Now things change. We're also a first response and things happen, but from a macro view, the municipalities, including the SCRD, does have a huge role. What I would say though about the vacancies, it hasn't been really a question of we're not able to fill our vacancies. It's just a hard and soft. We have people off, for medical reasons, for stress reasons, and they're the vacancies that cause us the biggest problem. So we could be, have a full complement of 35 or 36 members, but at any one time we could be carrying, anywhere to 5 to 6 what we call soft vacancies, and that's people that are in those positions but aren't workable or roadable is a term we use. So that's been our biggest challenge from a resourcing standpoint.
If I ask then, for the Sunshine Coast, of the total police funding on the Sunshine Coast, 35% comes from District to Seashell, and 65 comes from the other sources. And do we have an aggregate number of what policing costs on the coast are?
Don't take 35 and write that in stone, but
Okay.
it's roughly that.
Okay.
Do we have I'm sure there's a number that could be had about what policing costs in
Okay.
between the district, the Seashell, and the province. I don't have that.
Okay.
That would come through our client services, but I'm sure the number's available, but I don't have it with me.
Okay. If there's someone, maybe Tara, that's a question, right? How much money is spent on policing for the Sunshine Coast? If you could just keep track of that, of the questions as we go through this. And because I think that's part of the discussion is, do we actually know how much is spent on policing on the Sunshine Coast for people to understand? And then the other piece is, who gets to say how that money is spent? Okay. So carrying on, we got, I see Donna has her hand up, but David Kroll hasn't spoken. So if Director Kroll could.
Thank you. And I do apologize for being late. I had a meeting between meetings. This would be for Sergeant Newman. Where is the RCMP currently with their union negotiations?
Yeah, our union is ratified. So now they entered into, I want to say it was June 20th, but once again, don't quote me on the date, but it was within the last month or so that they began collective bargaining with the federal government. So yeah, we're ratified for the first time in 130 odd years. So it's new for us. So there's a lot of stuff to work through. You can imagine almost 20,000 employees and starting it, but we are finally ratified, yes.
Anybody for first time on the round table? Okay, looks like we're gonna go back to Donna. You had some more comments, Donna.
Yeah, I did actually. And the sergeant can correct me if I'm wrong about any of this, but my understanding is that the challenges of rural policing are quite different than the challenges of urban policing. And one of the reasons for that is that there aren't a lot of resources here to assist the police with things like mental health calls. Whereas in the city, you may have, mental health workers available 24 hours a day. You certainly don't have them here on the coast. So if there are, I guess that's the question. Are there resources that would support rural policing and make it a better deal in our community?
So that's a complicated answer. What I would say though, I think the coast is generally, I think, well funded, and we have a lot of social networks on the coast. And I know I work a lot with Darnelda and some community groups with the District of Sechelt, with the OPS. I think there's a lot of work being done, a lot of people that work really hard. And I'm talking outside the police here, both in mental health and addiction services and stuff like that. So yes, we are rural, but we're unique on the coast. And I know we throw that. Some of our biggest challenge is, we have size, from Earl's Cove to Langdale, we up the Jervis Inlet, the outer islands, just the sheer size of where we police. And then the split up urban centers, Gibson's, the Roberts Creek, Sechelt, we have them spread out. So we don't have one central area, which makes it easier to police from a resourcing standpoint. But from a services standpoint, yeah, there's no question. I mean, more mental health, without a doubt, we could use more mental health. But I think we do have a lot of services on the coast. Could we use more? Without a doubt.
Thank you. Mr. Kroll, Director Kroll, your hand is still up. Are you still interested in a comment?
No, it's, something that I think is unfortunate is we live in an age of social media, and it tends to be pervasively negative. And sadly, policing, quite frequently gets a bad rap. I had the opportunity of working with the Rcmp for a while, and it's sort of like this job. You want to criticize government until you're sitting behind the council desk or the boardroom desk, and you suddenly realize, oh my God, it's not quite, it's a little more difficult than we thought. And it certainly happens with policing. And I think one of the unfortunate things is it's hard for the Rcmp to toot their own horn, but I think, as a community, we really don't support them enough for the work they do. Director McMahon referenced, a rural community. And it's really difficult because in a community like this, everyone knows the local cop. He can't go to the bar and have a drink with his buddies because 2 nights later he's going to be doing bar checks. So it's difficult. So, social life for policing in a rural community, I think, is a lot more difficult. Director McMahon referenced the mental health issues. There's a lot of things that happen in a rural community that perhaps they don't have all the support. And I don't know whether, I certainly know from a Gibson's point of view, we're looking at, very seriously at the looming cost of policing. But I think associated with that, it's up to us to help promote the police in the community. It's something that's hard for them to do, and it's people are quick to say, oh, let's defund them because they're not doing a good job or they're doing something wrong. And I think it's more, they don't really understand what they're dealing with. And I think we could be a little more proactive in supporting the police departments.
Okay, I'm going to keep going through a list here. I got, I'm not sure if it's Director McLean or Seegers who is up first. Both of them have their hands up.
McLean.
McLean goes first.
Right. So I'll jump in about the original question. What do I see this conversation being on the Sunshine Coast? I think the whole idea of defund the police is really based on an American model of policing where the city council has a lot of control over the police. And I think across Canada, the police is more of an independent body, particularly in a regional district. We have an advisory committee, and that's about the link between policing and government. In Sechelt, it's a little bit tighter, like Mayor Seegers mentioned, in that we could set the levels of Rcmp staffing in Sechelt. So I believe currently we're at 11 Rcmp staff members that Sechelt funds, and we can play with that. We can bring it down to 10, put it up to 12 in discussion with the Rcmp. So we at Sechelt have a little bit more room. But since we are in an SCRD meeting today, I think the conversation should be focused on which social services can we fund as a local government to support the RCMP, like Director Kroll mentioned. I saw the discussion of police-based victim services. That's a great program that is supporting the RCMP that I think the SCRD should be doing more of. So what I'd like to see is have a conversation about what social services could we be funding as the SCRD that really take some of the burden off the RCMP. So then maybe Seychelles can make a decision to reduce it or and recoup some of those monies overall, or just provide a better level of service. So I think there is a lot that this board can do in regards to social services.
So the supports for the RCMP, not direct funding to the RCMP.
Yes, recognizing the role of this government.
Okay. Thank you. Director Seegers, you're next up with your hand.
Thank you. I agree with Director McLean. And there's another piece I wanted to reference that Director Kroll brought up. One of the items that has shown up locally, it was brought to my attention locally. It's something that I think has an impact on our members here. And Director Kroll said, you know, it's a small community, you go out for a drink and you run into somebody. Another piece of that is that on a day-to-day basis, it could be that the RCMP actually deal with somebody in the community in some kind of incident. You know, say what it is, it's whatever it is, and then they go out somewhere and they actually run into that person that they dealt with. So that's a detriment to them and contributes to higher PTSD levels with the RCMP, which then takes them off the job, which impacts our ongoing support, right, and our ongoing service levels. So I don't know how we as a regional district could impact those kinds of things. I know that we have, one of our recommendations, I think, to UBCM was about subsidies for RCMP officers in remote areas, so that it helps with the resourcing and encourages them to come here. I think that's about it. The mental health piece, we do need support for weekends so that the RCMP officers aren't sitting in the emergency department with people that they take in, because that can take them off the streets for a few hours at a time. I'll leave it there.
Councillor or Director Kroll, I see your hand is up again.
Yeah, it's me again, and thank you, Director Seegers, for sort of the anonymity for police in rural community is very difficult, and it does lead to problems. Just one question that I was thinking about earlier. There was an issue with radio communication in certain areas on the coast, and I don't know if Sergeant Newman is able to address it. I know we've been looking at additional towers going up for one thing and another. Is this going to help with the radio communication?
Yeah, I think we've addressed that. There'll always be some rural limitations wherever you are based on, topography and stuff like that. But all in all, I think we've got it to a level which we can manage quite well.
The Seychelles Hospital was an issue for a while there. Has that been rectified?
Inside the hospital, no, and that's something that likely isn't going to be rectified for a lot of structural reasons and equipment and whatnot like that. So unfortunately, that's probably an area where we are going to be essentially what Councillor Kroll is referring to. When we're inside, our radios don't work in some areas, so we're kind of beholden to cell phones and other people, and that can cause an issue if we're in an altercation in the hospital. So that is something we have to work around.
Okay, who do I see? I see some hands coming up. I see some first timers. So can I go to Director Pratt, who hasn't spoken so far.
Thank you, Chair Hiltz. Regarding the just the whole issue around reallocation and defunding police, and I think Director McLean had that right when he, it is very much a response into the U.S. model, which is very different than what we have here in Canada. And I think as a society, I think it's something that we need to look at as a whole, where we've always, the past number of decades, we've always been concentrating on the reactive standpoint rather than being more proactive in how we deal with society issues and with social issues. And as we move into a more proactive dealing with root issues before we get into a position where it's the end of the line and it's reactive, I think it's going to be a much larger conversation. We ask a lot of our local police forces and our Rcmp in assisting with all the gaps that we have in the social and social structures that we have. And I think there's some bigger advocacy pieces that we need to look at here with those social services and those like victim services and more mental health interventions prior to them getting to a point that they require a police intervention, because essentially that's the only source that's available, because there are no other sources. So it's almost like an emergency mental health, like a mental health paramedic or something like that you're starting to see the rise on in some larger communities. That'd be, I recently read something about an optimum world where it's the mental health paramedic that hops out of the ambulance rather than the police officer picking up the person on the street that's having a mental health issue. So I think we've got to look at some more advocacy here with the province and the federal government and move forward. But I'm not into until we have a better structure in place. I think our RCMP are always just going to be key as part of this process until we really prioritize the more social side of this.
Thank you. Director McMahon, you raised your hand.
Yeah. In reference to Director McLean, really the SCRD's role in this instance, because we don't operate the RCMP and we don't fund them directly, our primary role is advocacy with senior government, and the victim services part is a good example. We advocate with senior government. We do not offer to take on more downloaded costs. We advocate for them to do things differently. We could have a really big conversation, because you only have to look at who is in our prisons and why to realize that, there's a lot of problems we haven't addressed. A startling number of people in prison are primarily there because they are alcoholic or they have drug problems that lead to, cascading other problems. So, as a society, we are not dealing with this very well. We're not dealing with things until they get to the crisis point.
Thank you. Sue has her hand up. Thank you for your real hand there, Sue.
Yeah, I know. Can you hear me?
Totally well. Thank you.
Good. So just further to what Lori was saying and many of the points that she mentioned, I had jotted down, during slim budget times on the coast, and I'm talking about going back over the years, I know that our population has vastly grown on the Sunshine Coast in the last 20 years, but during slim times, we did really rely on those other services to support the RCMP that were mentioned, like victim services and the addiction services, mental health services. That is my background, so that's why I think it's important to mention that when we get that the slim times, we do rely on those services because, you know, we do become reactive rather than proactive, and in response to any issues that arise on the coast. So that's can be very unfortunate when you know, we're dealing with these various issues. You know, I ran a addictions program in the community for 12 years, so I know that. I was also the coordinator for the restorative justice program. So I know that all of these programs are really beneficial in times when we have to partner and work in support and with the RCMP. And I hope that we can still do that. I see that in the minutes there's information on the auxiliary program, which is also very beneficial. And, you know, I've done lots of ride-alongs. I've been there in some capacity over many years. And I know that when there's a heightened awareness and there's a heightened group of people like Citizens on Patrol and Neighborhood Watch and Speed Watch and all of those things, it really is helpful to support the RCMP in times when the money is not flowing so freely. So, yeah, that's about it.
Sue, when you say slim times, what do you mean by we turn to these other supports and during slim times? What do you mean?
I guess what I'm saying is budgetary slim times when you know it's more difficult to you know, I mean, I see some of the numbers of street checks and all of those kinds of things that, you know, we take for granted when we've got a full force and we've got lots of manpower. But there are times when it's not there, and it changes the dynamic of the community when, you know, I mean, people get that information pretty quickly and know what's out there. You know, back in the day, we had, you know, strategically placed cameras and things like that to assist in crime watch and all of those types of things. So it's always helpful to work holistically together as a community to support the RCMP during times when you know, that's what it's all about. It's more eyes and ears, and that's and more manpower, more hands on task. That's it. Yeah.
I'm gonna just jump in here a little bit. I'm gonna draw attention to the name of this committee, which changed at the beginning. And there's two components to it. There's the policing, and then there's the public safety aspect of it. And what it seems like people are talking about is there is these two separate aspects of the policing, which the SCRD doesn't really have a lot direct to do with. But then there is that building of community with all these other volunteer groups, which is more in the public safety realm. If that's, is there some agreement about the difference between public safety and policing, and that public safety is the broader term, and there's a lot of community in there, and that's a place where the SCRD, it seems like people are saying, has the role. And any comments on that? Sue, go ahead.
Sorry, just further to that, that's one of the reasons why I think when we first met after the elections to get together as a group, we talked about changing the name, and we said, do we want it just to strictly be policing? And my personal reason for continuing to call it policing and public safety was exactly what you're speaking about, is that there are two components to it. And when we're working collectively and we all have different roles, and maybe our role is more about the public safety issues in the community, and supporting the police, supporting the RCMP in the work that they do. Yeah.
Is it okay if I speak, Sergeant Newman?
Yeah, yes, please do.
First off, thanks for all the comments. I think I agree with almost everything. Really quickly, I think we've, with the whole Black Lives Matter, George Floyd defunding argument. One of the unintended benefits, I guess, we have seen a lot of community support directed at us, which is good. It's been negative in a lot of ways for the members, the mass media, social media. But all in all, the coast has demonstrated a lot of overt and really, you know, more quiet support. So we do appreciate that. It's not all negative, just so people know. What I wanted to comment on, and I apologize for the person who brought it up, and I'm going to go a little rogue here. This wasn't a scripted thing, and when Poppy and I discussed some of the content of this meeting, but I know we've been in conversation with the district of Sechelt in the past bit about, I think we've identified a need to better manage volunteers and community programs. We're a huge supporter of stuff like Business Watch, which was, you know, enacted over both in Gibsons and Sechelt over the course of the COVID initial response. You know, Crime Watch or Citizens on Patrol or something to that effect, I think have such a value they add to the community from a public safety standpoint, not just a policing standpoint. But one of the biggest challenges for us with those, you have a liability issue, which is always a huge issue, which changes stuff, but it's managing these resources. And that's where I think maybe, you know, the district of Sechelt, the SCRD, maybe have a part in helping funding, you know, a non-police resource to help manage, because the work that goes behind, you know, to manage 60, 70, 80 volunteers across with training and everything and security clearance, it's daunting. And it's something that we don't have the capacity to absorb. So, you know, if you want to talk about what something from the SCRD standpoint can do, because we can talk about the macro stuff like Vancouver Coastal Health and mental health and how they direct the resources, but I don't know if that's appropriate to hear, and it's a much bigger discussion. But locally, I think something like that is definitely something that would have an immediate benefit on the community and the police in general.
You're talking about some kind of a coordinator, a local government coordinator who coordinates these various support public safety support groups. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it would be a position, like a civilian position within the detachment itself. It would fall under our umbrella, but their primary mandate would be, yes, like a volunteer or a community coordinator. So, but we currently just don't have the capacity to, you know, to take that on a large scale basis. So. Okay.
So we got a couple hands up. So I'm going to go, we got 3 hands up and 20 after 2. So let's go through these 3 hands and see if we can just kind of wrap it up a little bit. There's some ends that can be tied together here, I think. So I think Director Seegers is first up here.
Thank you. I know that Poppy came to our budget conversation with a request for this civilian member. Given the times, I mean, it was something under consideration, and then given the times, I mean, we cut and slashed just like the regional district did this year, so that went away. But I want to go back to Sue's comment and yours, Director Hiltz, where you talked about the title of this committee, Sunshine Coast Policing and Public Safety. So it used to be Sunshine Coast Policing. And I think that was what determined who actually comes to this. If we're actually looking at having it be Sunshine Coast Policing and Public Safety, do we need to look at the makeup of who actually shows up at this table? Just a conversation.
I mean, involving more people who are involved in that public safety side. And
yes, so I mean, you know, as Sergeant Newman said, I go to the what am I on? Community Action Team, the Affordable Housing Society, the Homelessness Advisory Committee, right? And there may be representation here at some of those meetings from some of the people from the regional district, but most times not, right? Most times not. So how is that playing into this committee, I guess? And it might be we look at the terms of reference of this, or look at where do we want this committee to go and what do we want it involved in? And that might help determine what the makeup should be.
so possible revision to membership.
Yeah.
Okay. And going down the list, we got Director McLean.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to Sergeant Newman for bringing back that idea. We did reject it at East Health Council last year. So I think it's something that we should keep the conversation going. And I think the evolution of that idea from just taking it to managing volunteers, I could see great value in connecting some of the more professional support services that we have on the coast. So provide that RCMP lead, that civilian, can go out, they can talk to our DCH, they can talk to community services, they can talk to those organizations and coordinate their responses a bit better. Because like it was mentioned earlier, we do have a really strong civil society. We have a lot of not-for-profits who are doing really great things. So if we can coordinate a little bit better, I think we could really get some strong results out of that. And I'm just going to pitch it again. I hope come and support that with the detail in next year.
I think we lost you a little bit there, Matt, on the end.
That's all right.
But re-emphasizing the idea of that civilian position to coordinate volunteers, and to that coordination can have a multiplier effect out in the community if someone's there to do that kind of legwork, which the RCMP don't have the capacity to do at the present. Okay. So I'm going to Director Kroll and Director McMahon, before I give them a chance, is there anyone who hasn't spoken that wants to say something on this issue? Okay, let's go last comments, Director Kroll and then Director McMahon.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank Sergeant Newman for, he sort of raised the obvious. For example, with the business watch that we did in Gibson's, and then sort of turned our sort of profile for the procedure over to Seashelt. I know how much time it took Ed Hill and Lindsay Grist to, put the pieces together to make it happen. And it's a huge amount of time and a big commitment, and it has to be done by the right people. You can't just have people jumping in and sort of stirring the pot without, vetting the procedure. So, there are people in the community. I know there's a number of retired RCMP people who, volunteer in other capacities. We may, be able to sort of steer their volunteering willingness into more productive areas to be of assistance. But it is as Sergeant Newman said, it's a huge, daunting task taking on some of these projects and getting it up and running so it's safe and legal.
Okay, thank you. Let's go last word to Director McMahon. Then we'll try to conclude here somehow.
Well, I'm just wondering if the committee would like to consider the question of the makeup of this committee at our next meeting. I don't think this is the time. We haven't really thought about it, any of us, whether there would be a benefit to making this committee bigger, or whether we would just be making this committee bigger. And I'm not myself aware of what other committees there are, because you're right, there's a lot of them, homeless advisory and overdoses, and everybody's doing their own thing. There's very little coordination, particularly there's not a lot of communication between everything that's in VCH and everything that's outside of VCH. But whether this is the place to do that, I don't know. So we could flag that as a conversation for next meeting. Would people like to do that?
We got a thumbs up. It's, we can definitely add it to the agenda and see where we go. And we will be meeting quarterly, 3 months. That's September or October, huh? Would be the next. Okay. Director McLean, you still have your hand up? You want to? Yeah, we had some audio issues. Last word for Matt or Director?
Yeah. Am I sounding better now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. So I think just to summarize, my last point was it's maybe not just a volunteer coordinator role, it's also a community group coordinator role and playing that connection role to some of these professional organizations like BCH, like community services. So I think it's something that I'd like to take a look at the District of Sechelt, and hopefully the SCRD can come as a funding partner to that in the next budget cycle.
Well, I'm going to, the SCRD, if I remember, we have some report in the docket about social service creation somewhere leading, and this somehow seems to be a little bit related to that. I don't know where that project is right now. Do we put CEO McKinley on the spot and see if has that been come across your desk yet, the social service creation report that's pending?
I haven't seen it yet, but I'll take a look out for it.
Well, is there something this committee could inform the staff in terms of the ideas that have been generated, this idea of some kind of a coordinator to have that incorporated into the staff report as it moves forward? Is that an appropriate type of discussion?
I think at this point, we probably indicate to staff that we are looking to have that service be in place for this upcoming budget, if at all possible, right? Because we've talked about it since we got elected.
Mm-hmm.
We want to see it in place.
Moving it forward, so you're suggesting that some priority is put on this staff report in terms of the social service for the upcoming budget?
Yes, because otherwise we're going to go into this budget just like we went into the last budget and the budget before that, where we said we want to be able to fund some of these things, but we don't have a service. And we've asked to have the service put in place. So we need that prioritized by staff so that when we come up to this budget and we're looking at funding some of these things that we want to fund, we actually have the service in place to be able to do that.
Okay. Got Dean.
I wonder if there's an opportunity here because we're going to be getting together between senior staff and the board shortly, hopefully in early to mid-August, to have a strategic plan review. And the strategic plan review is also part of the initial, precursor to the 2021 budget discussions. And this would probably be an excellent area of discussion at the strategic plan review, because that does provide us with that direction, and then we can start to look at what it would take to do all the work required to establish a new service, look at the resourcing for that new service, and Sherry can look at the timelines on all the other things that are happening to see how we could put it together. But that might be a good place to start that conversation.
I think we've already had that conversation as a board at the board table, and we have actually tasked staff with coming back with that information to move it forward. So I don't think we need to redo that conversation.
Okay.
It needs to be actioned on staff's part.
So the recommendation might be to refer this to the board for a discussion on the priority of the service creation.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we want to do that as two motions? Does the discussion in the strategic plan, I don't think has happened within the strategic plan in terms of social service support, because it hasn't been a SCRD service in the past. So I couldn't say I'm familiar with that. So could we do two motions and let the board decide when they receive the committee reports about the priority of this social service, and to, as a separate motion, for it to be referred to the strat plan, just so that we're it's the belt and suspenders kind of approach, that would that be a reasonable approach? Two recommendations, one, and then when it hits the board table, then the board can have a little bit of go at what this committee has said. I'm looking for any ideas here. I got Donna's hand. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I feel that we're a little vague at this point, that we can, capture this in the minutes, move it over to staff. And because it's been a while since we had the budget conversation last year. And I wouldn't mind looking at it in terms of the strategic plan. And since Tina's not here, I can say that I think we should have a miscellaneous expense service into which we can shove everything that we can't fit into any other category.
I'm sure she'd have a strong opinion on that idea.
I think that's called Bill Gates, isn't it? That's what that's called. Okay. So let's try to wrap this thing up. So, okay, there is the social aspects of public safety. The Rcmp is limited to that resource. The public has been asking for some kind of social service from the regional district, which we don't know how to do. It's sitting on staff's work list. So this is about giving direction to the priority, but this is a board decision to decide. So is this committee got anything more direction other, there's the strat plan review, which, Dean, we're talking September?
I'm hoping for August, because the strat plan review, I've got Tina and finance working on some timelines, because the strat plan review is part of the 2021 budget discussions, frankly, and we don't want to get ourselves way down the calendar and put ourselves behind. So we'd like to do it sooner than later, especially coming out of the variance report that we're putting together now, which will help inform the strat plan review too. So many things happening, right?
Right. So Director Seegers, that's the most immediate suggestion from staff, is to incorporate this into the strat plan and that broader budget discussion and the review of the strat plan.
So recommendation that I'd be willing to make would be that staff bring forward to that strategic planning session or the strategic review session the recommendations as put forward by the board for the service for social initiatives. Because we made a recommendation. I don't remember what it was, right? But we made one to have staff do something around that so that it was ready for this next budget. So if they bring that forward, that would then be there for us to have that conversation at the strategic planning session.
Okay, that's a reasonable motion, I think, fairly clear. And you've got a seconder for that. Okay, we got a seconder for that. Discussion on that little point. Chair Pratt, you have a very intense look.
Do I? I know I'm trying to think about what the timeline is on and where we had left it at, and I'm not sure where it's at. I think if we bring it as part of the strat plan discussion, it's escaping me right now because we've had to do so much budget reconfiguration this year that I'm not sure where it'll land in our list of priorities. And it has to be a start of a new service, which is a whole legislative issue as well. So I think it best lands on the strat plan anyway. So I'd be in favor of this for more discussion on how we move forward.
Okay. Any other comments on the motion? Tara, do you have anything? Do you need to read it back, or you got something reasonably clear? Okay, I got a nod from Tara. So let's call the question on the motion before us about the short form of it is have staff prepare this for discussion at the strategic plan review. That's the brief. Okay, and all those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Something that didn't get mentioned is the provincial review of the Police Act, which our local MLA is part of that committee. And I haven't heard anything other than it being announced, but that looks like an advocacy piece for the SCRD to be ready to participate in that, which is supposed to wrap up in March 2021. Is there anything for the SERD to get involved in that, or are we going to wait to be asked to become involved in that? Any thoughts on that? Director Pratt.
I can reach out to our MLA. He's actually the chair of the committee.
Mhm.
So I'll reach out and just say that we are interested as a regional district, and just to keep us apprised as when any opportunities for engagement occur.
So for process, do we as a committee need to send this to board to direct you to ask this? If I remember, this has happened before from Dean.
Is it necessary?
No, at
No.
this point, I think he doesn't even know what's happening yet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
it's
They haven't
early.
even
Like, I
had-
mean,
yeah.
they've just, I think they're just figuring out the terms of reference, are they not?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
or have just, it's early days. So, I mean, if I
Yeah.
just say, hey, we're interested informally, I can text him right now.
Yeah.
If you want it to be part of the public record, I can email it and copy everyone. But
I think what I'm hearing is that we're interested, and we're going to look to him to communicate to us what they're up to, and ensure that if there's something that he feels that we can contribute, that he reach out to us to do that. And that's about it. And then it would come, as a formal something to the committee.
Okay. So moving on, we got a few minutes left here. So if that's all right, we'll move on. And items 6 and 7, I just need a process to remove these from the agenda, so we're not going to get to these. So, and do I need to do anything?
Actually, I could give you a quick update on the overdose prevention site.
Oh, okay. All right.
So as I said, I sit on the community action team, and I think Director Kroll's been at some of the meetings as well. We've had, in the last 2 weeks, we've had 3 meetings in response to overdose deaths on the Sunshine Coast. And Vancouver Coastal Health has moved forward with some initiatives. There's some plans in place, not publicly announced yet. Probably within the next couple of weeks, there will be public announcements about some of the plans that they're putting in place. And I believe it's today, is it, Director Kroll, that they're doing a survey in Gibsons with drug users in Gibsons to find out what services and what supports they would be looking for in Gibsons. That will be coming back as well to the community action team to look at how we can support them. So that's where we're at. Big changes within the last, I'd say, month and a half.
Okay, and we got Director Kroll, who's got his hand up. I think I'm also missing Director McMahon, so I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Chair. And sort of further to Director Seeger's comments, the meeting between the meetings I attended was to pop in on the sort of survey that CAT are doing with respect to the need for a safe injection site in Gibsons. At the time I sort of went in and went out, they hadn't had the response that they'd hoped for. So because they're aware of who most of the people that might be using the center, they're doing almost a door-to-door extension of the survey. So we should have those results fairly soon. And, Gibsons is certainly on board in, trying to assist in any way we can to curb this crisis.
Okay, thank you, Director Kroll. And Director McMahon, last word to you.
Yeah, I believe we were invited to a meeting, education session on the COVID crisis. I look forward to that, and particularly to learning more about the hidden portion of this, because, you see certain members of the community out on the streets, but there's a whole lot more people using at home, certainly in my area. And I would like to know, what the situation is there and if there's any support that we can provide.
Director Kroll.
Thank you. Something that I would mention, and if you have the opportunity to sort of promote the app, the CAT team are actually giving cell phones to people who have problems. if they don't have a cell phone of their own, and it's called Lifeguard. It was developed by Coastal Health in conjunction with a software creator, and it's an actual program that if you're using drugs, you use a program, you indicate the drug you're using. When you go to use it, you hit a start, and they send you a signal back within a certain time. And if you don't respond to that, cancel that call, they dispense an ambulance. So it's an app that has saved lives, and it is available. And so if you know anyone who might have need of it, it's online. You just go to the App Store. It's a free download, and it's called Lifeguard.
Okay, thank you for that update. So I'm going to conclude. Are we okay with the reports then? And the only we have a piece of communications, if we can, on Annex D on page 12 and 13. And on page, I'm not even sure if this is an SERD lane thing, because it's the Rcmp detachment, but it's asking implementation. This is on page 14. Confirmation of intent to proceed by July 15th, which is yesterday. Do we need to respond to this, or is this like we were included? Does anyone know?
I don't even know what the program is.
It says that.
I know it's an auxiliary program. What's that?
Really quickly, what it is it was kind of shelved a number of years ago when an auxiliary member was killed in just outside of Edmonton. But what it is people from the community volunteer. They're given a heightened level of training. In the past, they have wore sidearms. They've been trained to use firearms intervention options, and essentially they are an unpaid police officer that gives us that added resource without the cost to the community. It's incredibly valuable, or has been traditionally, and especially in rural areas. But like I said, because of the fatality a number of years ago now in Alberta, the program was really suspended, and it's only now coming back to, and that's the purpose of this. They want to restart the program.
Okay, just a little bit more details from Sergeant Newman. So is there an expectation that a local government would be responding to this? Like, is this the District of Sechelt aspect, or is this something where the SERD has a role?
I'll be honest with you, this was addressed to mayors and local governments. The cost is minimal. We usually, it's not a lot. We have 2 members of the community who are, I guess, for one of the different words, they're active, although they haven't been doing auxiliary duties. And we typically absorb those costs through our, just our operating budget. But like I said, this is more for, like I said, the mayors and local governments to be advised of. So I can't really speak to the July 15th reply date.
And Director Seegers, has this come before Sechelt yet?
We got the letter come through, but I didn't hear anything. I mean, it came to us a little while ago when we were still involved in all the COVID stuff, right? So it's only now kind of come to light and something that we could look at. I guess we should have a conversation with Staff Sergeant Bobby Howell about this.
Okay. So is there any action that this committee can take with respect to this piece of correspondence then? Just received.
I don't think that we can take any action as the SCRD because, again, we don't have service. I think this needs to go to Sechelt and Gibson's to respond.
Okay. I think have we received this correspondence? Yeah, I think so at the beginning. Okay. David, Councillor Kroll, you have your hand up. Did you want to say something?
I was just going to ask Sergeant Newman. Originally, as you mentioned, the auxiliaries wore sidearms. I believe now they no longer wear a sidearm. Is that correct?
Yeah, the program's undergone a lot of change over the last number of years. Prior to the Edmonton incident in St. Albert, actually, that I described, they weren't armed for, it got taken away for liability issues and training. The program was essentially shelved altogether after the Alberta incident. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not completely sure what, I don't believe they're coming back with firearms in this reincarnation, but we'll have to see, because we have reserve officers as well, which are retired members that come back. But no, in this case, even though in your letter you're going to see under training, they do list firearms. So maybe the thought is that they're going to be armed again, but I don't want to give you misinformation on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any final comments here before we kind of wrap up this Policing and Public Safety Committee meeting for July 16th? Any final comments from anyone? Okay, so if someone could entertain a motion to adjourn, please. Oh, we got first and second. All those in favor? Terrific. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for attendance, and thank you very much, Sergeant Newman, for being able to step in for Poppy. That's terrific. And I don't know what else to do here. I've got the buttons. I don't know what we're doing here. So we're concluded. So long, everyone. Thank you very much. Thanks.